You walk into that meeting room. They're already seated, smiling, pretending this is just a friendly conversation. But you know better. This isn't a discussion. This is war. And most people lose before they even begin because they don't understand the battlefield they're walking into. Sun Tzu knew this 2,500 years ago when he wrote The Art of War. He understood that every human interaction involving competing interests is fundamentally a battle. Negotiations aren't exceptions to this rule. They're the perfect example of it. And if you don't treat them as such, you'll be destroyed by people who do. The problem is that most people approach negotiations like they're having a polite conversation. They think fairness matters. They believe in good faith. They assume everyone wants a win-win outcome. Sun Tzu would have laughed at such naivety. In his world, there were only victors and casualties. In your negotiations, the same principle applies. But here's what separates Sun Tzu from every other military strategist who ever lived. He understood that the greatest victory is achieved without fighting. The most devastating defeats happen before the battle even begins. The strongest warriors win through positioning, preparation, and psychological dominance, not through direct confrontation. Today, I'm going to teach you Sun Tzu's 7 most ruthless strategies for dominating negotiations. These aren't feel-good techniques about finding mutual benefit. These are weapons of psychological warfare, refined over millennia of conflict, designed to give you overwhelming advantage over anyone who sits across from you at a negotiating table. Master these strategies, and you'll never lose another negotiation again. More importantly, you'll understand why you've been losing them up until now. The first strategy is what Sun Tzu called, know your enemy and know yourself. But most people misunderstand what this means in negotiation. They think it's about researching the other party's company or preparing their talking points. That's surface-level thinking. Sun Tzu meant something far deeper and more dangerous. Knowing your enemy means understanding their psychological profile, their pressure points, their fears, their desperate needs they're trying to hide. It means discovering what they cannot afford to lose, what they're secretly worried about, what keeps them awake at night. This isn't just business intelligence, this is psychological warfare. Before you enter any negotiation, you need to become a detective. Who are you really dealing with? What's their background? What failures have shaped them? What successes have made them overconfident? Are they aggressive or passive? Do they respond to pressure or retreat from it? Are they logical decision makers or do they operate on emotion? But here's the crucial part that most people miss. You also need to know which version of yourself to present. Sun Tzu understood that the wise general appears weak when he is strong and strong when he is weak. In negotiations, this means carefully controlling what the other party knows about your position, your alternatives, your timeline, and your desperation level. If you're negotiating from a position of strength, you might want to appear slightly vulnerable to lull them into overconfidence. If you're negotiating from weakness, you need to project strength without revealing your limitations. The key is that they should never have a clear read on your true position. Consider how this played out in one of history's most famous negotiations, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy appeared calm and measured publicly while privately facing enormous pressure from military advisors pushing for invasion. Khrushchev appeared aggressive and threatening while privately knowing the Soviet position was far more precarious than it seemed. Both leaders were carefully managing their public personas to maximize their negotiating position. The second strategy is win without fighting. Sun Tzu considered direct confrontation to be the lowest form of strategy. The master negotiator achieves their objectives before the other party even realizes a battle is taking place. This happens through superior positioning, better preparation, and controlling the narrative before formal negotiations begin. Most people think negotiations start when everyone sits down at the table. Wrong. Negotiations start the moment the other party becomes aware that a negotiation might happen. Every interaction before the formal meeting is part of the negotiation. Every piece of information you reveal or conceal shapes the battlefield. Every impression you create influences their strategy. The goal is to structure the situation so that your desired outcome feels inevitable to the other party. They should feel like they're making a logical decision based on circumstances, not like they're being pressured or manipulated. This requires thinking several moves ahead and setting up conditions that make your victory appear to be their idea. This is why the most successful deal-makers often seem to effortlessly get what they want. They're not superior negotiators in the room. They're superior architects of the conditions that lead to the room. By the time formal negotiations begin, the outcome has already been determined by the groundwork they've laid. Think about how Steve Jobs negotiated with record labels for iTunes. He didn't start by asking them to sell individual songs for 99 cents. He started by demonstrating that music piracy was destroying their industry, that their existing digital strategies were failing, and that they needed a solution more than Apple needed their content. By the time he presented iTunes as the answer, they felt like they were choosing salvation, not making concessions. The third strategy is use local guides. Sun Tzu insisted that no army could succeed in foreign territory without local intelligence. In negotiations, this means having inside information about the other party's real situation, their internal politics, their decision-making process, and their hidden constraints. This isn't about corporate espionage or unethical behavior. It's about understanding that information asymmetry determines negotiation outcomes. The party with better intelligence almost always wins. You need to know things they don't think you know, and they need to remain ignorant about things that would strengthen their position. Local guides in negotiations come in many forms. They might be mutual connections who can provide background on the other party's personality and preferences. They might be industry insiders who understand the real pressures facing their organization. They might be former employees who know how decisions really get made behind closed doors. The key is to gather this intelligence systematically and discreetly. You want to understand their internal dynamics without appearing to be investigating them. You want to know their pressure points without revealing that you know them. This intelligence gathering should feel natural and conversational, not invasive or obvious. But remember, they're trying to do the same thing to you. Part of using local guides effectively is controlling what intelligence is available about your own position. You want to make sure that their sources are telling them what you want them to hear, not necessarily what's true. The fourth strategy is attack when they are unprepared. Sun Tzu taught that timing is everything in warfare. The same principle applies to negotiations. The master negotiator doesn't just present better arguments. They present the right arguments at the right moment, when the other party is psychologically or practically vulnerable. This doesn't mean being unfair or unethical. It means understanding that people's decision-making capacity fluctuates based on their circumstances, their energy levels, their other pressures, and their emotional state. A proposal that would be rejected on Monday might be accepted on Friday if their situation has changed. You need to become sensitive to these rhythms and windows of opportunity. When are they under pressure from their boss? When are they facing budget deadlines? When have they just experienced a setback that makes your proposal more attractive? When are they in a good mood and more likely to be generous? But this strategy goes deeper than just calendar timing. It's about the psychological timing within the negotiation itself. When have you built enough rapport that they're inclined to trust you? When have you created enough tension that they're motivated to resolve it? When have you presented enough value that they're afraid of losing the opportunity? The master negotiator orchestrates these moments rather than waiting for them to happen naturally. They create the conditions that make the other party receptive to their proposals. They build pressure and then offer relief. They create problems and then present solutions. The fifth strategy is sacrifice to mislead. Sun Tzu understood that sometimes you must give up something valuable to gain something more valuable. In negotiations, this means strategically making concessions that appear significant to the other party but cost you relatively little, while gaining concessions that appear small to them but are extremely valuable to you. This requires a sophisticated understanding of value asymmetry. What costs you little might be worth a lot to them. What they give up easily might be exactly what you need most. The art is in identifying these asymmetries and structuring exchanges that feel fair to both parties, while actually favoring your interests. Most negotiators make the mistake of fighting hardest for the things that seem most important on the surface. They'll spend hours arguing over price, while giving away terms that ultimately cost them far more money. They'll focus on the headline number while ignoring the details that determine the real value of the deal. The sophisticated negotiator does the opposite. They'll make seemingly generous concessions on visible issues while insisting on specific terms that give them hidden advantages. They'll appear reasonable and accommodating while actually getting exactly what they need most. This strategy also applies to the meta level of the negotiation. Sometimes you sacrifice your position in a smaller negotiation to establish a relationship and reputation that gives you advantages in larger future negotiations. Sometimes you deliberately lose a battle to gain intelligence or positioning for the war. The sixth strategy is appear weak when you are strong, strong when you are weak. This is perhaps Sun Tzu's most counterintuitive principle, and it's where most negotiators fail completely. They think projecting strength means appearing aggressive, demanding, or inflexible. They think showing weakness means being honest about their limitations or desperation. Sun Tzu understood that strength and weakness in conflict are about perception, not reality. The party that controls the other's perception of the balance of power controls the negotiation. This requires careful psychological manipulation that goes far beyond simple posturing. When you have strong alternatives and don't need the deal, appearing slightly desperate can lull the other party into overconfidence. They'll make assumptions about your position that lead them to negotiate less aggressively than they should. They'll reveal information they wouldn't share if they knew how strong your position really was. Conversely, when you desperately need the deal and have weak alternatives, projecting quiet confidence can make them take your position more seriously. They'll assume you have options they don't know about. They'll be more generous in their offers because they're afraid of losing you to alternatives that don't actually exist. But this isn't just about acting. It's about creating genuine ambiguity about your true position. The best way to appear strong when you're weak isn't to pretend you are strong. It's to actually develop strength they don't know about while appearing weaker than you are. The seventh and most devastating strategy is create disorder under heaven. Sun Tzu taught that when the enemy is united, divide them. When they are prepared, create confusion. When they are confident, introduce doubt. In negotiations, this means disrupting their decision-making process and internal alignment. Most organizations struggle with internal politics and conflicting priorities. Different stakeholders want different outcomes from the negotiation. Various departments have competing interests. Individual careers are at stake based on how the deal turns out. The master negotiator understands these dynamics and uses them strategically. This doesn't mean being manipulative or unethical. It means understanding that the other party isn't a monolith. They're a collection of individuals with different motivations, different fears, different measures of success. By understanding these internal dynamics, you can structure your proposals and your messaging to create or exploit divisions that work in your favor. Sometimes this means making proposals that appeal to different stakeholders for different reasons. Sometimes it means providing ammunition to internal allies who support your position. Sometimes it means creating time pressure that forces them to make decisions before they can fully align internally. The key is to understand who the real decision makers are, what they personally need from the deal, and how internal politics affects their decision-making process. Then you structure your approach to maximize support from influential stakeholders while minimizing organized resistance. Now let me show you how these strategies work together in practice by examining some legendary negotiations where Sun Tzu's principles determined the outcome. Consider the negotiations that led to the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Napoleon appeared to be negotiating from strength. He controlled the territory and had the military power to keep it. But he was actually negotiating from weakness. He needed money for his European wars, couldn't defend Louisiana against British naval power, and was facing a slave rebellion in Haiti that made overseas territories liabilities rather than assets. Thomas Jefferson's negotiators understood this hidden weakness through their local guides, American merchants and French officials who understood Napoleon's real situation. They appeared weak by initially asking only to purchase New Orleans, making Napoleon think they had limited ambitions and resources. But then they applied the strategy of attacking when unprepared. When Napoleon suddenly offered to sell the entire territory, they had to decide immediately without authorization from Jefferson. Instead of appearing weak by asking for time to consult, they acted with confidence and accepted the deal. knowing that any delay might allow Napoleon to change his mind or Congress to interfere. The result was that America doubled in size for a fraction of what the territory was actually worth. While Napoleon got cash he desperately needed, but far less than the strategic value of what he gave up. Or consider how Warren Buffett negotiates acquisitions. He appears weak by being folksy, humble, and non-threatening. He talks about making fair deals and not trying to steal companies. But this persona conceals enormous strength, unlimited capital, no financing contingencies, and the ability to close deals faster than any competitor. He uses local guides extensively, building relationships with company insiders years before acquisition discussions begin. He gathers intelligence about family dynamics in family-owned businesses, management succession issues, and financial pressures that might motivate a sale. When he makes offers, he attacks when they're unprepared by structuring deals that solve their specific problems in ways that pure financial buyers can't match. He offers certainty when they need certainty, speed when they need speed, and continuity when they need continuity. He sacrifices to mislead by often paying prices that seem generous while structuring terms that give him extraordinary value. He might pay full market price but get favorable tax treatment, management retention, or strategic synergies that make the real cost much lower than it appears. Most importantly, he creates disorder under heaven by appealing to different stakeholders' different priorities. Family members who want liquidity, managers who want job security, boards who want certainty, and shareholders who want premium prices all find different reasons to support deals with Berkshire Hathaway. But let's bring this down to the level where you actually negotiate: salary discussions, vendor contracts, real estate deals, partnership agreements. How do you apply Sun Tzu's strategies in these everyday battles? Start with intelligence gathering. Before any significant negotiation, become a detective. Research the other party's background, their recent successes and failures, their public statements, their social media presence. Look for clues about their personality, their decision-making style, their pressure points. If you're negotiating salary, understand your manager's situation. Are they under budget pressure? Are they having trouble retaining talent? Have they recently lost someone important? Are they facing criticism for team performance? This intelligence determines your strategy. If you're negotiating with vendors, understand their business cycle. Are they at the end of a quarter trying to make numbers? Are they launching a new service and need reference customers? Are they losing market share and need wins? These factors affect their flexibility more than their published pricing. Practice appearing weak when you're strong and strong when you're weak. If you have multiple job offers, don't lead with that information. Build rapport first, let them get invested in you, then subtly reveal that you have alternatives. If you don't have alternatives, project quiet confidence and discuss your timeline as if you're considering multiple options. Use the sacrifice to mislead strategy by identifying what matters most to you versus what matters most to them. In salary negotiations, you might accept a lower base salary in exchange for better bonus structure, equity, or benefits that are worth more to you than they cost them. In vendor negotiations, you might accept higher unit prices in exchange for better terms, service levels, or flexibility that provides greater value. Create controlled disorder by understanding internal dynamics. In corporate negotiations, different departments often have conflicting priorities. Finance wants low cost, operations wants reliability, and executives want strategic advantage. Structure your proposals to give each stakeholder something they need while getting what you need most. Attack when they're unprepared by choosing your timing strategically. Don't ask for a raise during budget season when everything is locked down. Ask when you've just delivered a major success or when they're facing a crisis where your contribution is visible. Don't negotiate vendor contracts when you're desperate and they know it. Negotiate when your current situation is stable and you can afford to walk away. But remember the most important principle: win without fighting. The best negotiations feel like collaborative problem-solving sessions where you discover a solution that works for everyone. This doesn't mean being soft or giving up your interests. It means structuring the interaction so that giving you what you want feels like the natural, logical outcome. This requires preparation that goes far beyond knowing your numbers. You need to understand the story that makes your desired outcome feel inevitable. What problem are you solving for them? What risk are you helping them avoid? What opportunity are you helping them capture? Frame your proposals as solutions to their problems, not demands for your benefit. The master negotiator doesn't argue for what they want. They create conditions where what they want becomes what the other party wants too. This is the essence of Sun Tzu's philosophy. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. But here's what you must understand about implementing these strategies. They require emotional discipline that most people do not possess. Sun Tzu's principles work, but only if you can control your ego, your emotions, and your natural impulses. Most people negotiate emotionally. They get offended by low offers. They feel compelled to prove they're smart or tough. They react to pressure with counter-pressure. They take positions personally and defend them stubbornly. All of these reactions make you predictable and therefore vulnerable. Sun Tzu taught that emotion is the enemy of strategy. The moment you start negotiating from anger, pride, or desperation, you're no longer following a plan. You're reacting to their plan. This gives them control over the interaction and virtually guarantees your defeat. The disciplined negotiator maintains emotional detachment even while appearing emotionally engaged. They might express disappointment or enthusiasm, but these expressions are calculated tactics, not genuine reactions. They never let their real emotions drive their decisions or reveal their true position. This emotional control extends to how you handle pressure, deadlines, and apparent setbacks. Sun Tzu's principles assume you can maintain strategic thinking even when the other party is trying to rush you, intimidate you, or manipulate you. If you can't stay calm under pressure, these strategies become worthless. Practice this emotional discipline in low-stakes negotiations first. Notice your natural reactions and learn to override them. Develop the ability to pause, think strategically, and respond according to your plan rather than your emotions. Finally, remember that these strategies are tools, not guarantees. Sun Tzu never promised that superior strategy always wins, only that it dramatically improves your odds. Sometimes you'll lose negotiations despite perfect preparation and execution. Sometimes the other party will have insurmountable advantages or unexpected resources. But what changes when you master these principles is the quality of your defeats and the frequency of your victories. You'll lose fewer negotiations, and when you do lose, you'll lose less than you would have otherwise. More importantly, you'll win negotiations you never could have won before. The greatest value isn't in the individual deals you'll improve. It's in the confidence that comes from understanding how negotiations really work. When you see through the surface conversation to the underlying psychology, when you recognize the patterns and power dynamics that determine outcomes, when you can predict how different strategies will play out, you become dangerous in ways that most people never recognize. They'll think you're lucky. They'll think you're naturally persuasive. They'll think you're just a good negotiator. They won't realize you're applying principles of psychological warfare that have dominated human conflict for thousands of years. Sun Tzu understood something that modern business schools rarely teach. Every negotiation is fundamentally about power, psychology, and positioning. The party that best understands and applies these dynamics wins, regardless of who has the better logical case or more reasonable proposal. Your competitors are still thinking about negotiations as conversations. Start thinking about them as battles, and you'll win wars they don't even know they're fighting. The strategies are in your hands. The only question now is whether you're disciplined enough to use them and ruthless enough to win.